very clear. The new IT rules mean an end to privacy. Joining me on India First is Amit Malviya, National in charge of BJP's Information and Technology Department and co-in charge of West Bengal. Amit Malviya, WhatsApp says asking for the first originator of a message is equivalent of asking them to keep a fingerprint of every message which would break end-to-end encryption and undermine right to privacy.
Gaurav, first of all, we have to understand that India is a democracy. We have a constitution and we have rules of law that dictate how we operate. And no private entity, whether it's WhatsApp or Twitter or Facebook, can be above that. They can't arrogate to themselves the right to sit in judgment of things. Now let's come to what the government of India is saying. The government of India is merely saying that there are instances such as national security, law and order, child pornography, and crime of sexual nature against women, namely rape. In such instances, if the agencies or a legal authority demands, then WhatsApp, or for that matter, any other platform, must give the details of the first originator, the person who started the initial conversation or the chain that created the crime or the frenzy associated with it. Now, you would agree that all governments have the responsibility of ensuring law and order, or at least ensuring that pedophiles and sexual crimes do not happen. If there are people and if there are inimical interests that are using these platforms to get away, how do we check them? If terrorists are using platforms such as WhatsApp, or for that matter, Twitter, or platforms like Facebook to recruit young people and radicalize them, how do we check it?
The Congress says, Amit Malviya, the Congress says the new intermediary rules are dire, drastic, and draconian. So it's not just the rules, it's also the manner in which your government, the BJP government stands accused of putting, for example, the sedition laws. So, you had Abhishek Manu Singhvi, who says this displays the government's big brother attitude on display.
Look, the Congress is going to say something like this, and it's not surprising that the Congress is today siding with those who want to be neo-colonizers in this country. They have a history of using foreign interference to further their politics in India. But let me come to the substantive issue. There is an IT Act, and the government, through an additional rules, can frame the architecture for how it is going to implement it. And I don't think it is in violation of law. And if it is, the courts will look into it. But we are very clear, and so are several legal luminaries who have been looking at this matter very closely, that it does not interfere. I want to ask the Congress party a counter question. In 2020, last year, Meera Kumar, their own senior leader and former Lok Sabha speaker, her Facebook account was locked, and she had no way to seek any redressal or air her grievance till it became a political issue and Facebook had to then step in. So clearly the government of India, while it is claiming these intermediary rules, is asking for several issues, and WhatsApp is just a part of it. The key issues are that appoint a resident compliance officer, a contact officer, a grievance redressal officer. Now, that's not too much to ask for. If
but
you are going
what is the end goal? You want these people appointed because you want, whether it's Facebook or WhatsApp or Twitter, you want them to work under your thumb, as the opposition alleges. They say this is an attempt. Ultimately, the goal is to stifle dissent. Opposition voices or voices that oppose you, they would be charged with sedition, and then pressure would be put on Twitter or on other platforms to either remove that content or to give information, and there's no privacy and there's no free speech, sir.
Look, Gaurav, this is a very fallacious argument. The government of India has very clearly said that it applies only to 4 instances of terror activities, of law and order, child pornography, and sexual crime against women. Now, political dissent is not part of it. So clearly the opposition is muddying waters here. Let's go issue by issue, and you will realize that in no way infringes on the privacy of common citizens. And let's not forget, WhatsApp is also saying that we are fine to share information as long as it comes from a valid legal authority. The government of India is saying that it could be a valid legal authority and those designated under the 69 IT Act rules that we have.
If I may, that's where the trouble comes in. WhatsApp very clearly has said in court that the new rules lack, in their application in the Delhi High Court, explicit parliamentary backing. The point being that officers of the government can now demand any information. It should be a legal demand. It should come from a court of law based on perhaps some preliminary investigation. If courts say, perhaps WhatsApp can be asked to comply.
Gaurav, WhatsApp is sharing all our data with the parent company Facebook. Clearly, senior designated officials of Government of India are more reliable and more responsible than some of these unknown names and faces in Facebook. If your entire data with all details is with another private company called Facebook because it happens to be the holding company of WhatsApp, then clearly that argument doesn't hold. Secondly, the courts look at evidences when it is produced to them. They look at documents, and providing evidence, providing document is the job of the agencies. So naturally, one of the ways of asking these tech giants to provide information is through the court route. It also means that there are certain designated officials and not everybody who can ask for that information. And I think that should be very acceptable to these companies if they want to operate here in India, which is one of the largest markets in the world. They derive their valuation from here. They derive their money from here. So they have to abide by the laws of the land here. We have a constitution. We are not banana republic, and these tech giants are not laws unto themselves.
The government wanted manipulated media tag removed from, your party colleague Sambit Patra's tweet. Police even went to Twitter office. Twitter not only did not comply with that, they also added Raman Singh, former Chief Minister of Chhattisgarh, but other BJP leaders and members to that manipulated media list. Is big tech not complying with government orders, be it a manipulated media tag or compliance of a nodal officer or grievance redressal officer? Where does this then leave the government? Are they cocking a snook at the government? And the word that you used, neo-colonizers, what does that mean, sir?
Gaurav, let's for the minute keep the government out of the equation. You look at the American elections, they deplatformed Donald Trump, the sitting US president. Now, that is the kind of power that they can exercise, and that is the kind of interference that they can have in your democratic process. France, Germany, several African nations, all of them have complained that these tech platforms have at some point in time interfered with the democratic process. Now, would we want our democracy to be held hostage to such interventions is the question that we must ask. As far as putting manipulated tags on some leaders of my party is concerned, I want to ask Twitter, and that's exactly why Delhi police went looking for officials in Twitter when they had to serve a notice saying, what is it that you know beyond what the agencies already know? And if there is a matter which has a FIR registered by the Congress party, which is under investigation by agency of the government of India, how is it that Twitter can sit in judgment of that? That is the question we should be asking. This debate should be about partisan politics. The Congress cannot be speaking for Twitter because it happens to be in opposition. Because at the end of the day, if Twitter is going to arbitrate on India's political matters, on India's democratic process, then it is a matter of concern. And it applies to Facebook, it applies to WhatsApp, it applies to Twitter, it applies to every other social media platforms. And I call them neo-colonizers because these companies today want you to think in a certain way, they serve you information in a certain way, they speak of privacy, but violate it in the first instance. And that is where the problem lies. You've got to look at the issue on a much larger canvas.
Fair enough.
Do you want millions and millions of Indians held hostage to these companies? I mean, You could be having a conversation with your spouse about a holiday on Facebook Messenger, and next you see that an ad pops up for property in that destination. Now, isn't that violation of privacy if you really want to go down that path? But the government has still been very conservative and said, we'll ask for information where it pertains to national security, law and order, child pornography, and sexual crime against women.
Let me now throw this open.
For young children to be exposed to pedophiles.
Okay. Amit Malviya, for the moment, many thanks for joining me.